Thanks for joining me. This lab session is entitled JMeter Test for the Internet HEROKUAPP website. In this exercise, we can look at another website to test, the Internet HEROKUAPP website. Let us go to the website and get familiar with its functionality. Then we can go back to the JMeter IDE and set up, define the test plan by inserting what we need to conduct a test of the target application. The strategy will be kept simple to access the site and get some test results demonstrating the application's responsiveness and stability. In the process, we will review several of the JMeter elements that can be utilized and their benefit to performance testing. To access the HEROKUAPP website, I typically type in Internet HEROKUAPP, and we see login page. I select this option, and now we're at that site we're talking about. So let's get familiar with it a little. First of all, let me point out that you can see in the text near the top here that there's a mention of a user name as well as a password. So if we capture the username, place it in the username field, and then the password, copy paste that, then click the login button, and we are successful. We see a message at the top: you logged into a secure area. Welcome to the secure area. When you are done, click log out below. So we have a log out button. We click that. And that's going to be the extent of our test. Now, we can do one other thing, but it's not necessary for our, let's say we type in demo and demo. That should give us an invalid response. And there we are. Your username is invalid. So we won't do that part. We're just going to do the happy path, which is logging in with the correct user credentials. Let's talk about the test plan element and the thread group element in a little bit more detail. The test plan object has a checkbox called functional testing. When selected, it causes JMeter to record the data returned per sample. If you have selected a file in your test listeners, this data will be written to a file. This can be useful during small runs to ensure JMeter is configured correctly and your server is returning expected results. The file will grow quickly, and JMeter's performance may suffer. This option by default is off and should be off if you are doing stress testing. You can also use the configuration button on a listener to decide what fields to save. Now for thread groups, the thread group elements are essential for any JMeter test plan. Controllers and samplers must be under a thread group. Other elements such as listeners may be placed directly under the test plan, in which allows them to apply to all the thread groups. As the name implies, the thread group element controls the number of threads JMeter will use to execute your test. The controls for thread groups specify a number of threads, ramp-up period, specific number of times to execute the test. Each thread will execute the test plan completely independent of other threads. Multiple threads are used to simulate concurrent application connectivity. The ramp-up period informs JMeter the length of time to ramp up. The objective is to reach a specific number of threads. As an example, if 100 threads are used and the ramp-up period is 100 seconds, then JMeter will take 100 seconds to get 100 threads active. Each thread will start every second after the previous thread was started. If there are 30 threads and a ramp-up period of 120 seconds, then each successive thread will be delayed by 4 seconds. Ramp-up needs are dependent upon how soon user threads need to engage in the test. Thread Group also has a scheduler feature. The checkbox at the bottom of the Thread Group panel enables extra fields in which you can enter the duration of test, the startup delay, the start, and end times of the run. You can configure duration in seconds and start delay also in seconds to control the duration of each thread group and after how much seconds it will start. When the test is started, JMeter will wait for the startup delay before starting the threads of the thread group and run for the configured duration time in seconds. Please notice those two options override the start time and end time specification. An option that is not the best but is available, you can use the two other fields named start time and end time. When the test is started, JMeter will wait if necessary until the start time has been reached. At the end of each cycle, JMeter checks if the end time has been reached, and if so, the run is stopped. Otherwise, the test can continue until the iteration limit is reached. Okay, since we ran a script before, we developed one for the Google site, now we want to do one for a different site, the HEROKUAPP website. Maybe we could start with the other script. Let's try that. So, go open and go to the correct location, scripts, and choose this guy. So here's the script we had before. This was to go against the Google site, google.com, and we have a home page and a page returning that we have disabled. We won't use that. But let's see. We know that there are 3 pages that we will process. So let me create 2 more of these requests. So if I go inside here to duplicate, now I have 2, and I'm going to create a 3rd one, duplicate. And the first one, I'm going to call it, we could call it whatever, but let's just call it login. And the second one was secure. And the third was log out. Now that's what I remember in getting familiar with the application. You might not have noticed that, but I did. Okay, so what we're saying is we want to do a 3-step process. It's going to go to the login page. Of course, it needs to enter information, the user credentials, and then we're going to go to the secure page, which will authenticate and let us know that the user credentials are valid. And then we have an opportunity to click a button and log out. Well, we're new at this tool. We're thinking, this ought to work. I'm not sure how I enter the credentials. I'm not sure how I click the buttons, but let's give it a try anyway. Let's see what happens. So we have the login page. I'll click on that. Let's look at this a little closer. What I know also is that, I'm going to go back to the default. Let's start there. On the default, we want the correct URL there. Let's get the correct URL. Go back to Internet HEROKUAPP. Select login page, and here we are. We'll just grab that entire thing. Close that. Come back here and paste in the URL. Now, let me mention a couple things. It's very common, especially when you start using JMeter, to put the protocol value here in with the full URL. But that's not the way it works. With JMeter, you take that out, and that's all you need. Over here, if it's different from HTTP, you want to put in that value. In this case, HTTPS. We don't need the / or the colon. It will take care, JMeter will take care of attaching that and creating the correct URL that's needed. The second thing is, this is the HTTP request defaults element, and so in that we want to put in just the generic value that we would normally use and want to pass on to these other page requests. All right, so when we go to the page request, now we have what we need here for the default. We go to login. We see that it's going to pick up the correct protocol and IP. What we additionally need is login. So that will take care of this page request. Go to the secure page and we type in secure. Go to the logout and we type in logout. So we should have what we need now. We're not changing anything else, and we're just going to try that and see what happens. One more thing. We have an assertion. Let's expand all of this. We need to be careful. What are we testing? So for the login, we say we're looking for it to tell us that there's Google there. That would not be correct. So let's do a different thing. Let's do a response code and change this to 200. Now we're validating that it got that far. And the next assertion, nope, we don't want that. So we will change that to response code. Double click in this area, capture and overlay with 200. And then the next assertion, same thing. Let's do response. Type in 200, and now we have it. Leave the think time as is, and we leave that disabled, that page returning, And so we're going to look at the output as it comes. First thing, we save. And this is, let me do a couple more things. One, let's go here to the test plan, and let's just call that, it was Hero, K-U-A-P-P. We'll give it that name. The scenario should be fine. We're just going to do one thread, one ramp up, one iteration. Okay, the name is fine. We can leave that as is. We know the default is now going to go to the HEROKUAPP.com site. When we look at the login, we're going to go to login and hopefully find that and assert that we have found it, and so on. Let's go back to view results tree. We're going to save as and call it Hero. Okay, now we're ready to give it a try. We click the button here. Interesting. Let's see what we got. The request went as this, login, which we expected. The response shows the internet. The secure page shows the internet, and logout shows the internet. That's not quite what we expected. Let's look at this from another perspective, from the HTML. So we're on the login page. You logged out of the secure area. Let's go back to the top. Okay, that looks correct. You must log in to view the secure area. We didn't expect that message. So it's still on the login page. And then the logout, it says you logged out of the secure area. But it's really still on the login page. So we have a problem. It looked like it tested okay, but it really just tested the login page. We didn't have to provide credentials to get there, but we have to provide credentials in order to process and go to the subsequent page or the secure page. And then from the secure page, we should be able to press or click on the logout button and get back to the login page. And that's not quite the scenario that occurred. So, what do? Let's clear everything. Now, I'm using this clear button rather than the single. I tend to do that more often than not. And the reason being, there's another output. If we look at, options and log viewer. If I click on this option, it now allows me to see that there is a log and there is log output. We're not going into the detail about that, but sometimes when you're looking for resolving some particular problems, you might need to look at the log output to see what happens. It doesn't automatically display it, but once you have this option set, then it should show that. Okay, so now that that's showing, let me click this button so you can see what happens. We're looking at the view and we're looking at the log, and both gets cleared when I click this button. If I clicked the single one, it would only deal with the view results tree, and the log would stay as is, and we'd just be appending more and more output to the log. This way, we're clearing it as we go. Okay, let's move on to the next step. What we want to do is to consider another approach. So there is a record approach that would help us to see if there's something missing. And obviously there is. One of the things that's missing is authentication. We don't see anything having to do with that. Now, I could go to the login page and I could add some parameters, but I don't know what I need to add. I don't know what the names are. Of course, I could go to the view source and look through the HTML data, and I should be able to find that information. But there is another way. JMeter provides recording, and so we're going to look at recording for the first time, even though that's the next thing we're going to go to in the course. We're going to go into more detail there, but here we're going to do it initially for the first time so you can see that process and then create the script we need. Okay, so we can start with what we have here. I'm going to collapse everything again, and now I'm going to expand a little bit of it. So there is this login page, secure page, and log out. What I want to do is I want to remove that. Delete. I'm clicking on the delete button, and yes. Now that's gone. Here at the thread group level, I'm going to add a a controller named recording. There it is. And there's one more thing I need, one more element I need for recording, and it's under the plan. I right click, add, and the last thing here is non-test elements, and the one I want is called test script recorder. Click that. Notice it comes to the bottom here, and I'm going to add another results tree. Duplicate, and then I'm going to watch how I move. I click and drag, and I'm going to cause it to be pasted inside this script recorder, which in effect puts it subordinate to that element. So now we have a view results tree here for the recorder, and we have one for the normal operations. I'm also going to move recorder controller up a notch just so it's there. That's where I want it to ultimately be, below the think time and this other disabled request. Now, what else? I've got the right URL here. I'm going to leave that as is, not changing anything here. I'm going to eventually come back and change this controller to a different controller. We'll see that. And one more thing. Let's look at this test script recorder. We're adding this in now. It has the ability to start a record session and stop it or restart it. It has a port. My default right now is 8888. I can change that to just about any port you desire. Typically, it needs to be a port that's not in use. I don't need to put anything in the domain area. Over here where it says use recorder controller, my recorder controller could be anywhere, but it happens to be inside this scenario. So if I click here, I will see another place that references it. And this is the one I want. So I select that. Over here on requests filtering, I'm going to add a suggested excludes, which may not be all of the excludes I need. And sometimes as you get better at this, you can add other file extensions that will help you remove some of the extraneous data that comes in a record session. But this is a good start. Now, I go back to test plan creation. I want to add assertions. And all that does is allows for JMeter, as it's recording, to decide whether there's an assertion needed for a particular request, and it populates it for you. Okay. Now, I think I'm done here. There's one more thing that you need to keep in mind when you're going to go into a record session for JMeter, and that is to go to your browser and go to your settings. In this case, in Chrome, it's called Settings. Go to Advanced, System, and Proxy Settings. So we're going to use Proxy Settings. I scroll down a little bit to this Manual Proxy Setup, and I click this little button to turn it on. And I should have this information in there. http://localhost. And I want the same port that I have in JMeter. In this case, 8888. And that's all I really need. Don't need to do anything else. And save it. Now it's ready. This browser is ready to be used by JMeter. I can do that with other browsers as well. Similar, not exactly. Close that. Now, so we should be ready. We have JMeter. It's going to talk to the browser and collect data through that port. So, let's click here. I want to view what's transpiring as we record, and I want to save. And now I want to go back to the test script recorder and click the start button. I will get a pop-up root CA certificate. Click OK. Now I'm ready to go to the browser. Open it, and I want the internet dash, there it is, HEROKUAPP.com login. Hit enter, and I'm at the page now. I should be in a record mode. I'm going to enter Tom Smith as the user. I'm going to enter the password, paste it, and I'm going to click the login button. You logged into a secure area. We're on the secure area screen. It's not saying the internet. And we're ready to click the logout button. Takes us back and says you logged out of the secure area. You're on the login page. And we have the login button. We could go back and log in again or log in with something else. Well, that should be it. I'm going to close the browser, and I'm going to stop the record session. And to verify that something was recorded, look over here on the left and you see recording controller now has something below it. So if I click there, I see quite a bit of information that was recorded. Now, how do I know what do I need? Well, remember we started with login /login. So we see that one there. If I click on that, it's a typical login page request. It may not be exactly what I wanted, but it's the start. And if I look further down, I see secure and I see logout. So those are the ones I was expecting. So what I'm going to do, all the rest of this, before I delete it, I'll let you see a few of them. Notice it's going after Google. So what's happening here is my browser is set to bring up Google. And so therefore you see a lot of references to Google. And that's what's going on before we get to login. So I don't think I need anything before that. I'm going to be bold and say, let's get rid of all of this. I don't need it. Now I could take some time and go through each one and see if there's something there, but I'm 99.9% sure I don't need this. So say goodbye to that data. We won't waste time on that. So now under the recording controller, we have, oops, I left one more in there. Let's delete that one. I start with login, and I want to end with let's end with login. Let's just take this one off. So we start with login and we end up back at login. In the middle, do we see anything that doesn't look like we need it? See here we have Google again, and Google. So I don't think we need those. And this OAuth, that's also Google related. So I'm going to get rid of those. And we have another OAuth token. I don't think we need that. What I'm going to do, just in case, I'm going to disable. That's the other option I can take to disable things that I'm not sure I'm going to need. Now it's getting down to a more manageable amount of information. Let's look at this. Is this related to Google? Yes. Is this one related to Google? Yes. How about this one? Yes. So let's get rid of those. And now we have login. We have this grayed out, which is disabled. Authenticate. That was what we were really looking for. And there you can confirm that we needed that. It uses two variables, username and password, to pass those values to the secure process. So we want the secure process. Looks like it got disabled. We want to enable. And got the log out and log in. So now let's look at those and see what we have. There's the login path. That's disabled, and it's really Google. Let's get rid of it. Now, start again. We've got login. We see the login path. Authenticate. It has its path for the same URL that's in the defaults. So that's all for the HEROKUAPP website. Secure. Log out. Log in. All right. Let's give this a try. But before I do that, one more thing about these view results. You'll notice this view results tree has nothing in it, but the one that we use for recording, it has plenty of information in there. So if I wanted to go through here and find out what is being passed from what to what, I could do that. If I'm not clear about what's going on with authenticate and secure, log out, log in, I can look at those and see what data is passed as part of the request, and I can see what data that comes back as part of the response. Let's look at, again, so the view results tree is empty here, but this one is not, and the log is not. So why don't I click the clean up button to clean all. Now all that's clear, nothing's here, nothing up my sleeve, nothing in this view results tree. Okay, one more thing. Recording controller. I'm going to click on it, right click, and there's another option here called change controller. Whenever you have a controller element, you can change it to some other controller element. And I want to go with one called a simple controller. It really does nothing. It just groups those events. So all of the events, as you can see, are now underneath this one controller. Doesn't do anything for me other than that. Just keep them together. And under each one of those, we have a header manager. There's nothing special on that. It's basically the same thing that's in this header manager. I could go in and just remove them. Now, do we have, let's expand this again one more time. Do we have any assertions? Let's make sure what these assertions are doing. This one is a text response, but we don't know if that, what text do we want to look for? We haven't seen the output yet. We could have looked at it in the recorded view results tree and there decided on what text we might want to look for to confirm that that particular page has been served. However, we can do something else. We can change that to a response code, and we should expect that it will be 200. So let's add, double click 200. Let's go to the next response assertion. These were added during the record. Same thing, change it to response, add, double click 200. Now, I'm assuming everything would be 200. Sometimes there are other values, but let's see, are we done? Yeah, we had those two response assertions and we've changed those. They should work that way. And we can collapse, and now you see the information again. Everything's under the simple controller. I could give that simple controller a name, but otherwise I can leave it as is. It's not important right now, but if I wanted to, I could do that. Okay, now let's see about testing this. We'll point to this view results tree and click the start button, and voila, we have login, authenticate, secure, log out, and we don't see, oh, login was grayed out. Sorry about that. Let's enable. And let's clear that and rerun again. And then we'll look at the details. Okay. Now, so we have login, authenticate, secure, log out, and log in. Let's look at the requests as they went out. Log in, secure was associated with authenticate, and then secure again, log out, and the request, log in. Interesting. Do we see log out here? Yes. And then log in. Okay, and then log in. All right. Let's go back to the top and let's look at this from another view. HTML. We want to look at the response data. There we go. Okay, so now we see for the login page, this is what appeared. That's good. That's what we expected. For authenticate, it says you logged into a secure area. So that's good. And we're still in the secure area. The log out, you logged out. Do we see those? No. We see that one. You logged out of the secure area and then log in. There it is. Now, one more time. We go here. Let's look at response data text. Okay. So now we see here at the login, the title is the Internet. What happens when we go to authenticate? It says the Internet. Interesting. Go to secure, the Internet. And we see the Internet. So let's look at each page this time using looking for the H2 statement or tag. And what do we find? The login page is identified as the login page. So we did achieve that. When we went to authenticate, do a find on that page, and we find it is the secure area. So it was after the login was successful, so we went to a secure area and it said welcome to the secure area. When you are done, click log out. So we know we reached the right page. We can look again on secure and do a find for the page heading there. Again, it's secure area. Welcome to the secure area. Then go to the logout page. Look at the H2 and we see login page because it reaches back to the login page. And then the same thing with, let's make sure there isn't another. Nope, that's it. So let's go to login, do the same thing, do a find, and we see login page. This is where you log in. Okay. And I mentioned about the controller, and that's the last thing we want to talk about in this session, is the use of the controller and the use of samplers. We mentioned earlier that you go to the thread group and do an add. You have a list of samplers and you have a list of controllers. So when you select a sampler, one of the common ones you may select would be the HTTP request. So we've seen that in action several times. We'll see others at a later time in this course. But one of the most common ones you'll use for web testing for sure is going to be the HTTP request, and we'll be talking about the debug sampler and a couple of other samplers as well. Then with the controllers, you'll find that some of the most common ones will be the transaction controller. It's nice sometimes to be able to use the if controller or loop controller or while controller. And there are other controllers and we've made use of the simple controller, but there are several others like the runtime controller. All of these can be made use of for various reasons, and we'll be talking about those in more detail as we proceed through the course. For some final thoughts, JMeter has two types of test event elements, samplers and logical controllers. Another reference name is requests. These drive the processing of test events. Samplers instruct JMeter to send requests to a server. For example, use an HTTP request sampler if you want to instruct JMeter to send an HTTP request. You can customize a request by adding one or more configuration elements to a sampler. We will see some of that soon enough. Logical controllers instructs JMeter on request management. For example, you can add an interleave logic controller to alternate between two HTTP request samplers. With samplers, they are processed in the order they appear in the tree. Controllers can be used to modify the number of repetitions of a sampler. And the samplers, you can do things like FTP requests. We mentioned HTTP, REST web services, JDBC for database access, Java object requests for Java programming, JMS requesting, JUnit requesting, LDAP, mail, OS processing, as well as TCP requesting. Each sampler has several properties you can set, and its behavior can be further customized by adding one or more configuration elements. If you are interested in having JMeter perform basic validation on the response of your request, add an assertion to the sampler. We saw that. For example, in stress testing a web application, the server may return a successful HTTP response code, but the page may have errors on it or may be missing sections. You could add assertions to check for certain HTML tags, common error strings, and so on. JMeter lets you create these assertions even using regular expressions. You can also insert listeners to see varying types of output. A common one is the View Result Tree Listener, which we saw. It supports seeing the events and associated output data real-time and post-execution. My time has ended for this session. I thank you for yours. Join me in the next video.